Good morning, students. Today we would be talking about lease agreement. This topic we've already done in class. Today we'll do a quick revision of this topic. Now, when we talk about lease, lease is a transfer of right to enjoyment of certain property. So here we are not transferring the ownership, we are just transferring the right to enjoy that property. It is either for a certain period or perpetuity. So it can be for a certain specified period or it can be perpetual. It is an agreement by which the owner of a property, it is an agreement by which the owner of the property or the lessor transfers his right to possession to the lessee. So it is an agreement for, by which lessor transfer his right of possession to the lessee. Here what we are transferring is right of possession. We are transferring the right to enjoy that property. It can be for a certain period or it can be perpetual. It is not an absolute transfer of all the rights in the property because we are not transferring the ownership. It is a partial transfer, and what is transferred is merely the right of possession and use of that property. So it separates ownership from property. And ordinarily, a lease is always with respect to land. However, every right that can be possessed can be made subject of a lease. Thus, there can be list of copyright, a patent right of way, right to receive interest on the government promissory note, and so on and so forth. So, what we come to conclude from here is that what we are translating, that it is an agreement to transfer right of possession to the lessee by the lessor. So, and it can be for a certain period or it can be perpetual. Then when we talk about definition of lease, section 105 of Transfer of Property Act defines lease. And according to it, a lease, it defines a lease of an immovable property, and it enacts that lease is a transfer of legal right of enjoyment and occupation of a specific immovable property for specified period or in perpetuity by one person to another in consideration of a price paid or promised to be paid periodically during subsistence of the lease. Such transferor is called the lessor, and the transferee is known as the lessee, and the price or consideration is known as the premium. So here we get to know three things. Firstly, this, that it is a right to enjoy the property. Then we learned about lessor, lessee, and premium. So lessor is, the transfer is called the lessor, the transferee is called the lessee, and the price paid is called the premium. And the money, share, services, or other things to be so rendered is called the rent. So we got to know four terms here. One is the lessor, lessee, premium, and rent. And in a lease, the transfer of immovable property is not absolute transfer, as I told you in the previous slide also, like in case of a sale where we transfer the ownership. Here we are just transferring the right to enjoy that property. So the ownership and possession gets separated from from the certain period, but after expiry of specified period, possession again gets merged into ownership. Now, what are the, before we talk about essentials of lien, a letting or grant of property, and particularly a deed giving effect to the contract between the proprietor of land, building, fishing, or other real property, the landlord and a tenant, to whom the proprietor grants the possession and use the stated subject for a term of year in return of a stipulated rent or annual payment. So leasehold property may be subleased. This, when a property has already been leased, it can again be subleased. So we'll talk about the essential of lease. First is the competency. The lessor, that is the transferor who is making the lease, must be competent to transfer it, and he must have that, possession, or he must have the possession. I'm talking about, he must be the owner, because you cannot transfer more right than you have. So he must be having that right to transfer, and he cannot be a minor, and the person to whom it is transferred also cannot be a minor. So here we're talking about the competency of the lessor and the lessee. Second is subject matter should be immovable property. Then immovable property must be a transferable property. There must be transfer of right to enjoy such property. Then lease must be made for a specific period. I told you it can be expressed or implied, or it may be in perpetuity. The consideration may be for premium or rent or both. The lessee must accept the transfer. If you have not accepted it, then it would not be regarded as a lease. So lessee must accept the transfer. uh, in lessee there is a separation of ownership and possession, because the ownership still remains with the lessor, that is transferor. Possession is transferred to the transferee or the lessee. The lease must be created as per the provision prescribed in section 107 of the Transfer of Property Act 1882. So, it should also, one of the few more requirements is that it should be executed by both lessor and lessee and should be attested like a bond. It should be on the requisite stamp paper as provided under Indian Stamp Act 1899. So lessee, lease of immovable property from year to year or for a term exceeding 1 year or reserving a yearly rent are compulsorily registrable. So for less than a year or so, then it may or may not be. But if it is, from a year to year basis or a term exceeding 1 year, then registration is compulsory. Lease made by government and agricultural lease do not fall under the Transfer Property Act, and their registration is optional. So when we know about lease now, the definition of lease, the importance and essentials of lease, now we come to the next part, which is very important, and that is the drafting of lease. So here I have just given you a draft of a lease agreement with respect to here we're talking about lease agreement for plant and machinery. Now what do you write first is the details of the lessor is specified here. Then you write the details of the lessee. Then what, that the lessor has decided to lease the property to the lessee, referring to the leased property. Period for which it is to be leased, then the rent, warranties, title declaration, ownership of the leased property, indemnity, surrender, what all rights he's surrendering, remedies available in case of default, waiver. Then we also talk about notices, how it has to be transferred to that it shall be given to the party in writing or by post and so on. Then in case of any, if you want to talk about ADR mechanism here, that can also be mentioned. Then the details of the witnesses, then signed and delivered by lessor to lessee, the details here, then the details of the witnesses here. This is the format of the lease, how you will be drafting a lease agreement. So while you're drafting it, please make sure that all the points that are highlighted here has to be mentioned in your lease so that you fetch good marks. So student, this was all about lease. In case you are still facing any problem with respect to this topic, please drop me a text message or just WhatsApp me or drop me an email regarding it. Thank you so much.